Have you ever wondered what happened when Kathleen Kennedy took over and George Lucas retired? Were you ever curious about the employees who worked under Lucasfilm and, well, they acted in a sane and creative manner, creating great stuff that people loved? What was it like to go from that to a disastrous climate to fail? Today, we'll tell the tale with someone who knows quite well exactly what happened. A former Lucasfilm employee speaks out. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the channel that is changing hearts and minds simply by telling the truth. And today we're doing that by giving voice to someone who knows exactly what happened, how it happened, when it comes to Lucasfilm. We are so excited to yet again, and perhaps the finale in this series of videos we've been doing with Knee Pain, we're excited to bring to you the backstory, the behind-the-scenes information in regards to Lucasfilm and what it was like when George Lucas left and Kathleen Kennedy took over. Folks, if you love Star Wars, if you love Lucasfilm, this is a can't-miss video, and let's get to Knee Pain right now. Let's move then to Kathleen Kennedy comes in after you've been hired. She comes in as the new leader, and then the Disney acquisition as well. So you've got all of these changes that are happening around you. One of the things that has been put forth as sort of crystallizing this shift and the emphasis at Lucasfilm was the story group. And it was that early on in Kathleen Kennedy's tenure, there were many articles out there about how that story group was now entirely made up of women, and that Kiri Hart was running it, and they were having these, dinners at her house to go over these sorts of things. And The Last Jedi sort of came out. It was a manifest of that. So I'm curious, how did the environment shift from the George Lucas time, which I know it was the twilight of his control of the company, and so perhaps he wasn't as available or as intense as he had been. But how did you sense the feeling and the atmosphere change in Lucasfilm pre-Kennedy versus post-Kennedy?
So one thing happened. I mean, that was definitely a weird time. And I had mentioned this, I felt that Kathleen was proposing we kind of felt that as part of the pressure of Disney too, because they're a business, which is here's a huge roadmap, which everyone gets excited when they see a big roadmap. We don't know stories or names of productions. It's you just see that's work, right? So there was actually initial excitement, okay, there's a big plan. What specifically is the plan? Have no idea. As far as things changing, I mean, a lot changed for animation. We got moved out of Big Rock Ranch, and that was something about the environment that you were in, physical environment. Big Rock Ranch really played a big part of that. So when we had to move down to the Presidio down in San Francisco, it felt and always had felt until the day I left, a different job. So it wasn't
Sure. The
I
whole
think I
ambiance
could
had
have
changed.
Yeah, I think I could have quantified it better if we had stayed at Big Rock to see the changes. But when your entire environment, everything changes. You go from a nice drive down Lucas Valley Road, this winding road in the country, beautiful scenery, to Highway 101, which is just awful mess of cars. Everything changes.
Did it make you feel like you were just another cog in the entertainment industry versus you were doing something special prior?
It did. I definitely felt that way. I was really apprehensive. I was kind of, in some ways, kind of disappointed I wasn't laid off, because I never really had an interest of working for Disney. I never heard from a lot of people as I was coming up, starting to make my connections. A lot of people had said, try to avoid working for Disney. In fact, because I also had a software company on the side, we were doing plugins for Maya. People said you might want to avoid Disney because they don't like that kind of, which I couldn't understand from a business perspective, conflict of interest. But I still did for a couple of years, my first couple of years at Lucasfilm, until I stepped away from doing that, because it was too much work to do all day long. But I definitely felt I think more of a cog. I was just initially I didn't know at that point. I think there was a point when I was there, before Disney, before everything happened. I knew George would retire. I mean, the guy was getting older. It's a lot of work running one production, right? I think you know that. He
Sure.
had like what Clone Wars. He had the Star Wars Detours, which never aired. Strange Magic. He was doing Red Tails. He's got his nonprofits. He has Skywalker Properties, and he has Lucasfilm. And he's not a young man. That's got to be exhausting. So him, when we learned he was going to retire and had things over to Kathleen Kennedy, which was the first announcement, I actually just expected that. I mean, that's a lot of work.
Can I ask
for
you
one person.
a little bit on the timeline side of that? Was the announcement of Kathleen Kennedy was supposedly after George Lucas sold to Bob Iger, but before it was announced? Do you, from your perspective, did you have any awareness of the timeline there that you can remember?
I don't remember the exact timeline anymore. All I remember was we had really no idea about the Disney thing at all until it was happening. Actually, how I first found out is I got an email from one of my friends that went to Pixar saying, "Welcome to the family." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And then the next email came in was the company announcement. So
the Pixar people knew before the Lucasfilm people. That's fascinating.
Apparently, I don't know if there's a delay in the email system or just, I don't know, my inbox or whatever, but that was, I think, because I was going up from you go from the bottom up or the top. I mean, you go from the top down, right? Because you open your email, it's like, what's at the very top? And I'll click on an email from somebody I personally know before I click on a company email, to be honest.
I see.
I still remember the exact order, but I remember that's what I read first was "Welcome to the family." And I was like, huh? And then I kind of clicked down, and maybe it came in, or I had to click down farther in my inbox. I'm like, oh, but it was very, very, very tight window. Like it all came out at once. So I don't remember the exact timeline now, but no, it's a fair assessment. It wasn't. I knew we were, they announced Clone Wars was getting shut down and layoffs. I kind of made my peace. Like, yeah, okay, time to move on. It's been a good 3 years. I mean, that's honestly 3 years. Sometimes that industry is that's long enough to be with one place. And then when it's like, oh no, you're staying, then I don't know. I've always kind of felt like, like I never really wanted to work for Disney, and now I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that feeling kind of haunted me for the next 5 years of like, I'm in a company I never really wanted voluntarily want to be a part of. So it took a while to find out or figure out where I was going to go and when to go too, because the time just goes by. You think, no, one year of this, I'm gone. And then you're so busy. Next you know, it's 2 years, 4 years, then 5 years. Like, okay, now I'm finally gone. Because time flies by so fast.
Was your expertise ever needed beyond animation? Did you ever work with any of the other divisions in Lucasfilm? Did you ever have any influence over technical issues with feature films, anything like that? Or video games for that matter?
Not with the video games, not with LucasArts, a little bit with ILM. I mean, there's a lot of collaboration with ILM teams. We used a lot of the same tools. And one of my first experiences early on was I helped develop a piece of software for what we call set dressing. It's when you dress a set, digital set, props, debris, cars,
Sure.
light poles. I was helping design it for one animated feature, and then they turned out they got a hold of me and like, hey, we heard you're working on this. We need the Hug team, which that was the show name for Avengers, was Group Hug, or just they called it Hug. And Show Hug actually wants to use this because they need to set dress in New York City. And so even though I was never officially crewed for Avengers, I did assist a lot of the layout teams, like the environment setup teams, and how to use the tool and help troubleshoot the tool on the Avengers sets. And so I had a very, very, very tiny bit to do with the New York City sequence in Avengers. And that was probably, of all the experiences I had, one that touched me the most, because when I went to watch it in the theaters and people were standing up cheering during the New York City sequence in Avengers, I cried a little bit.
And you knew.
Because I remember seeing these shots as animatics. I remember opening them up and looking at them. And I remember being excited, like seeing the first animatics of Hulk jumping around, smashing the aliens. I'm just like, this is going to be amazing.
Oh, the Hulk visualizations were transcendent, especially after Incredible Hulk, where I'm just going to say I disagreed with the idea that the Hulk should have no body fat on him. It's not how I pictured the Hulk.
Yeah.
All right, so let's walk through. Okay, that's a great point to be made then on your experience with Marvel, because here's towards the end of your time at Lucasfilm, there was a separating out of Lucasfilm success and Marvel success. These were on two different trajectories. So as you were exiting, The Last Jedi had landed, and yet Marvel was at that point still on its way up, heading towards Endgame. Did you ever sense a feeling inside the studio, inside Lucasfilm, that, man, why are we not in that same position? Did you ever get, I know that people couldn't outwardly say, you know, we had huge issues with Last Jedi. Like, that wasn't a safe thing to talk about in the workplace. And it goes right down also to that Disney nice issue that's holding back the Disney company right now. You know, you just can't have inner criticism. But did you ever sense that people were like, why is it working for Marvel?
I think a little bit. I mean, people in and out of the industry, not in and out of the industry, but maybe in and out of the company, people I'd worked with in the company, there was definitely that was starting to come up. Like, it was like, well, you can kind of count on Marvel. Marvel at the time is going to keep knocking it out of the park. And as far as like being the critical, it wasn't just like, you know, I mentioned this before, like in a one talk I had with someone, which was, it wasn't like it was a company director, but I would compare working somewhere like that where you have all the fans in one place and take the Twitter atmosphere and put it into a company. Everyone's now under the same roof, all the different opinions. So suddenly it's not like people you just block on Twitter. These are people you deal with in real life, but it's also like the Bay Area attitude. I started kind of detecting that a little more around that whole Bay Area. And it's just like a whole vibe of that region.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I kind of felt like people I'd known, you know, in and out of the company, like when I started critiquing like the Rey character, just saying, I'm not really feeling it. Like, listen, I don't mind Daisy Ridley. In fact, I watched her most recent movie, where the biopic about the lady who swam across the English Channel, and I'm really glad that she did that, because I want to see her stand on her own feet outside of Star Wars. I have nothing against her or the idea of the character, but people had said, because I was critical of how they portrayed Rey, what followed me after that was, this is a general attitude of the Bay Area, which really drove me nuts, was if there's a new movie coming out and I said, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to see that or whatever, wasn't interesting, people would say to me, it's like, well, yeah, because you never liked movies that had women in it. It's like suddenly you're just like this bad guy because you just said, yeah, I'm not really feeling about Rey. Like, I didn't understand why she did this or had this ability. Like, I'm asking questions, and that's just general blowback. And so the thing is, I started experiencing that. Like, I know a lot of you, I think people like now the past few years are like, oh, why is this happening? I started seeing this 10 plus years ago. I remember a group of us were critiquing like comic book movies. We thought the graphic arts or graphic novels that did not translate well to film. And we brought up Sucker Punch. And a young lady ripping into us. Like, we just said, man, yeah, I didn't like Sucker Punch. And of course, she brought up the whole gender thing. And she's actually said to us, she goes, explain to me one problem that you had with that movie that had nothing to do with gender. I'm like, crack my knuckles. I'm like, here we go. You asked for it. Because I could give you a laundry list of issues that have nothing to do with the gender of the characters. And that was like, you know, I didn't consider like a company issue at all. Like, I considered this was like an individual. And at the time I considered like just one run-in with somebody who had a huge chip on their shoulder. But even that individual, and I talked about this in a video, like, ever since that incident, like, I thought I made a pretty good case. Like, I talked about the editing. I says I prefer characters that I fear for. That's why I've never been a big Superman fan. I like characters that have ongoing weaknesses. They're always vulnerable. And when like the main protagonist, when she got like that huge samurai knocked her through like a wall and a statue, and she just hits the ground and just takes off running like she's not injured, like, I disconnect at that point. I'm like, I don't think she can be injured. I know she's in a dream state, but I disconnect with that. So even though I felt like I made rational arguments for the remainder of the time that I had to deal with this young lady until, you know, she had moved on and went somewhere else, she would always, like, her desk was near mine. She would get up and she would just kind of glare at me out of her eye. And it's like, are you really upset with me because I did not like a movie that you liked? I mean, wow. But then, like, so I kind of crawled into my own bubble for a long time. And I started seeing over the past couple of years popping up, like, people like, why are people acting like this? And I started looking back. I was like, wow, the writing was on the wall, but it was really isolated. But now, like, I think these people are finding each other and creating a louder voice. And that's my speculation. And there's just they're indoctrinating others to act like that.
Following 2016, did you feel, was there like a political change inside the studio as well? Did it become more forthright, people making political positions, or Was there a chill in
I
the
think
air?
a lot of people definitely. I mean, I went to the just around the studio. I went to the because I did street photography at the time. I went down to San Francisco and I didn't know what was actually going on because I didn't pay attention to events. I was there for the Women's March that happened, which also before the Women's March happened in San Francisco, there was a pro-life march that had happened. And there
Heard
were
it here
people
first,
just
folks. Knee Pain thought there were strange-looking hats until he figured out what was going on.
Yeah, actually, I did. Because I don't look at news. I'm like, what is going on? Then I started looking at my phone. I'm like, oh, wow. As a street photographer, this ought to be interesting. And then I get there and I see there's a pro-life march happening before this. I'm like, oh, wow. You know, as we talked about before the call, someone's asking about my book over here. I have books on war photography, conflict photography. And I was like, this is like the things that I was into. At one point, like I was just photographing crowds and someone jumped me to try to grab my camera. I kind of flipped them over my shoulder. And then their partner up and shoved me, and they're yelling at me, calling me, I know you're trying to keep it PG here, effing Breitbart. They're calling me effing Breitbart. I'm like, I'm not, what are you talking about? And
whoa, what
because
a
I'm a
conclusion
white
to jump to.
Because I'm a white male at the camera, so suddenly I'm part of the conservative journalist. And I thought it was really interesting. Like, people were really like aggressive. And I do have one photo that I took because I was going around street photography, and there's one lady holding up a sign like for abortion, and then she was holding out like a hanger in the other hand. And I asked her if I could get a picture of it. She starts screaming at me to get away from her. And I just was like, listen, like, I'm a street photographer. This is for the art. I think it's a very powerful image. You can hide your face behind the sign if you don't want to be in the picture. And she actually agreed. I still have the photo. And the lady that was with her, I was like, you can step out of the camera if you don't trust me. She goes, no, I want to be seen. I was like, okay. But
that's
the
question I would have when you're protesters and you want to be heard. Why would you not want to be seen?
Oh man, you point a camera at some kids were throwing stuff at me, screaming fascist, things like that. So, but getting back to what you asked about the studio. So yeah, there was it was everywhere. And certainly there were people that were mad at me because they assumed because I'm white and older and bald, they kind of like, well, who'd you vote for? And you probably didn't vote for her. Like what the comment was, I was like, well,
what a workplace.
I just said,
what a workplace.
Yeah, I was like, listen, like, I actually didn't vote for Trump. I still had issues with him. I voted independent. I have a lot of issues with the two political parties. And I thought, well, I was like, oh, I didn't vote for him. I vote independent. That still wasn't good enough. They're like, and then they got really mad at me, like, you might as well voted for Trump. And it's like, okay, so it's not good enough that I didn't support him. I just didn't support
even despite that California, it didn't matter anyway. So
yeah, that's part is I voted independent. I was like, it doesn't matter. But people are like, you have to vote. It's like, go ahead.
So you're describing a studio that was inundated and in politics. Do you think?
I think everywhere was. Yeah,
well, sure.
And
but do you think that flowed up into the creative process, though?
That wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me. I'd say nobody seemed happy, and if people were happy, they weren't open about it. Everywhere, everywhere. I mean, why would you want to be open about that? I was to the point where I didn't like being open about, voting independent. So,
right.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that at all. At all. People are very opinionated. People are very upset.
One more question, or else we're going to have people be upset because we need to get to super chats. But I do have one more question for you, and that is, following The Last Jedi and you being at Lucasfilm, did you sense anything from was there any talk of third-party partners being dissatisfied? Was there any talk about where the path was forward for Star Wars? Did you ever get a sense that people were concerned in the least?
No, not that. I think because all the TV shows hadn't happened, like we'd only just seen the movies, and I think maybe if I had been there for additional years afterwards, maybe there would have been something different, but I didn't really get that sense.
You left right before Solo, is that right?
Yeah, it definitely was. I think gone before Solo. I think the last screening I saw there was Rogue One, and then I think I was on a medical leave during the Last Jedi, the second one of the sequel trilogy. I was on a medical leave, so I didn't RSVP for the screener, so I didn't go to it.
Well, fascinating though that to hear that the studio, and just like, by the way, many places in California, but I'm not sure that it was that way across the entire country. I'm not sure that everywhere that workplaces became so entrenched in politics that you had to answer who you voted for, at your place of work. And so But I think
Yeah.
I think that Lucasfilm being where it was located, and by the way, I think you're exactly right. Had Lucasfilm had your work still been taking place out in the country, out there where George had intended for all this to take place, I'm not sure that it would have been so entrenched in
Hard to
that
say.
feeling. Yeah. And we have come to the end. But boy, oh boy, what fun it is to share our time with you. A true honor, a true great responsibility, and we take it very seriously. Folks, we would so appreciate the honor of having you click that like button, share, subscribe, click it, stick it to the algorithms. It is the notification bell. Drop a comment down below. Let us know your thoughts. And folks, if you would like exclusive, additional information and content here on the channel, well, consider clicking that join button. It'll make you a member. It's the price of a soda per month, and you'll gain access to all kinds of member-exclusive content, the likes of which no other channel has ever seen. Folks, thank you for being with us. We hope you're having a great time. Until we see you again, keep learning, keep growing, and as always, keep having fun.